Princess Elara of Thalindor had always believed that humans were fragile creatures, soft and frail in comparison to the towering warriors of her world. Yet when the human first appeared at the edge of the royal gardens, battered and bloodied from a crash landing, she found herself curious, for there was something in his eyes that spoke of an inner fire, a determination that had survived the vacuum of space and the violence of his own people. She approached cautiously, expecting fear or pleading, yet he stood tall, scanning the surroundings with a wary intelligence, and in that moment she realized that this human carried a presence that defied all expectations. Elara's advisors whispered warnings, urging her to send soldiers to restrain him, claiming that humans were unpredictable, dangerous, and untrustworthy. Yet she found herself stepping between her bodyguards and the human, drawn to his calm defiance as he raised a hand in greeting, not in surrender, but in cautious diplomacy. And she noted the way he seemed to understand the tension in the air, the subtle movements of her guards, the unspoken threats that surrounded them. A creature born on a distant world, who could read intentions as clearly as any trained diplomat, and her heart flickered with both curiosity and caution. The human introduced himself as Rylan Ward, speaking in a language that her world could understand, though his accent and cadence were strange and melodic. He explained his journey, a starship lost to pirates, an escape pod hurtling through space, a desperate attempt to survive that had brought him here. Yet despite his own story of danger, he showed concern for her, asking if the palace and its inhabitants were safe, and Elara realized with surprise that this human, whom she had expected to be gentle and weak, possessed a quiet courage, a steady awareness of the world around him, that was already beginning to unsettle the notions she had always held about her own superiority. The courtiers watched with a mixture of horror and fascination as she spoke to the human without fear, some clutching their jeweled staffs, others whispering that a mistake of judgment had been made. Yet Elara ignored their murmurs, focusing instead on Rylan's eyes, which gleamed with the intensity of someone who had faced death countless times and learned to survive. She asked him about his abilities, and he admitted he was trained in combat, in strategy, in survival, but not with the grandeur or magic of her world, merely with ingenuity, instinct, and resilience. And she found herself intrigued by the notion that such mortal determination could rival centuries of royal training and mystical rites. That night, while the twin moons cast pale silver light across the palace gardens, Elara observed Rylan as he moved through the shadows, testing his limits against the natural predators that prowled the palace outskirts, creatures that even seasoned guards avoided. Yet the human handled them with precision, using the environment to his advantage, dodging claws and fangs with fluid grace, striking only when necessary to protect himself. And Elara realized that his power did not come from magic or royalty but from raw human ingenuity, the ability to learn, adapt, and endure. And a spark of awe began to kindle in her chest as she watched him survive the wilds of her own planet. The following day, emissaries from rival kingdoms arrived, their armies poised for invasion, seeking to exploit the unrest in Thalindor. And the council met to decide the fate of the human, some arguing that he should be executed, others claiming he might be a strategic ally. Yet Elara defended him, insisting that his skill and judgment had value, even if his origins were foreign. And she found herself listening as he proposed strategies to fortify the city, his ideas, simple yet brilliant, leveraging terrain, morale, and human unpredictability, concepts her council had overlooked in favor of brute strength and magical wards. And for the first time in centuries, a human mind impressed the rulers of Thalindor. Rylan trained with the palace guards, though not in the formal styles of Thalindor, but in ways that pushed their perceptions, teaching them about ambushes, reading opponents, anticipating movement, exploiting weakness. And while the guards were skeptical at first, they soon recognized the effectiveness of his methods, and Elara felt a thrill of hope. For she had never witnessed anyone so small influence so many. His presence was like a spark in dry grass, igniting potential where there had been complacency and arrogance, and she began to wonder if perhaps humans were not to be underestimated, if their ingenuity and courage could alter the fate of her world. Tensions escalated as scouts reported enemy forces advancing, strange machines and warriors wielding technology unfamiliar to and the council grew frantic, debating magic alliances and sacrifices. Yet Rylan remained calm, observing the reports and the terrain with patience, mapping strategies in his mind that no one else could see. And Elara realized that his calm confidence was contagious. inspiring the guards and the council alike to consider options they had never imagined, for the human's perspective was not bound by the traditions and fears that governed the kingdom, but by a clear vision of what could be done and how survival could be ensured. On the eve of battle, Elara walked with Rylan along the palace ramparts, the wind tugging at her silver hair as she observed him meticulously inspecting every vantage point, noting paths, shadows, weak points, and timing, asking questions that revealed both intelligence and humility. And she realized that though she had expected him to be gentle, the human possessed a strength that transcended size, magic, and lineage, a combination of instinct, courage, and adaptability that made him formidable. Her heart raced, not with fear but with admiration, for she sensed that his presence alone might turn the tide of the coming conflict, and that her world's survival rested on the shoulders of this extraordinary mortal. When the enemy finally arrived, a shadow over the horizon, Rylan led a preemptive strike with guards trained under his guidance, moving with unmatched precision, anticipating attacks, striking where least expected, and the soldiers followed his commands with unwavering loyalty, inspired by his fearlessness, while Elara watched from the palace towers, her chest swelling with awe and relief, for the human she had once thought delicate had revealed a power beyond understanding, a force not born of magic or nobility, but of sheer human resolve, and she knew that the battle for her world had only just begun. Yet with him by her side, she felt a certainty that victory was possible. The battle erupted at dawn, the enemy forces descending like a black tide over the rolling plains, strange machines hissing with energy, and warriors clad in dark alloy advancing with precision. Yet Rylan moved among the guards as if born for this chaos, issuing commands in short, clear phrases, anticipating every strike, every maneuver, and the soldiers followed with unhesitating trust, their morale ignited by his presence, while Elara watched from the palace walls, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and admiration, for she had never seen a human coordinate an army with such skill and instinct. Rylan darted through the battlefield, his movements fluid, almost impossible to follow. He leaped onto the back of a mechanical beast, slashing at its joints with improvised weapons, pulling it down before it could crush a squad of guards, and the nobles in the towers gasped, some whispering that such audacity was suicidal. Yet it worked, for every calculated strike disrupted the enemy's rhythm, and Elara felt an unfamiliar pride swell within her chest, not only for the human who had proven himself unstoppable, but for the hope he had inspired among her people. The enemy commanders were perplexed, their strategies falling apart as their forces were outmaneuvered by unpredictable tactics. Rylan anticipated their movements like a chess master, predicting attacks, exploiting gaps, guiding her soldiers through ambushes, and even when wounded he refused to falter, shrugging off pain with a stubborn resilience that seemed almost supernatural. Elara's eyes followed him constantly, her mind racing to comprehend the depth of his courage, the simplicity of his humanity, wielded like a weapon more powerful than any magic she had ever commanded. Elara found herself descending into the fray, her golden blade cutting through enemy ranks, but it was Rylan's presence that guided her, his shouted instructions precise, his timing impeccable, and for the first time she experienced the battlefield, not as a princess protected by magic and protocol, but as a soldier alive to every heartbeat, every strike, every opportunity. And she realized that humans possessed a kind of intuition that defied training, a natural understanding of survival and combat that allowed them to accomplish feats her warriors only dreamed of. The enemy unleashed a massive siege engine, a towering construct bristling with weapons, its movements coordinated with terrifying accuracy, yet Rylan studied it with sharp, calculating eyes, directing squads to flank it, to disable its supports, to collapse its wheels before it could reach the walls. And every step worked, every maneuver succeeded. The siege engine toppled with a resounding crash, the ground shaking beneath their feet, and the soldiers erupted into cheers, their fear replaced by awe. Elara's heart swelled with both relief and amazement, for she realized that the human's strategy had saved her city, her people, and perhaps even her world. As the sun climbed higher, the enemy attempted to regroup, sending elite warriors to strike directly at the palace gates. Yet Rylan anticipated the counterattack, moving faster than anyone expected, his instincts flawless. He intercepted the attackers with a mixture of brute force and cunning, turning their own momentum against them, using the terrain, the shadows, and the confusion of the battlefield to his advantage. and Elara watched him, her breath catching. For the human she had thought gentle had become a force of nature, unstoppable, a whirlwind of precision, strength, an instinct that inspired her people and unnerved her enemies. The nobles began to murmur in fear and admiration, some whispering that this human must be more than mortal, that no one could survive such assaults without supernatural skill. Yet Rylan remained grounded, moving as if every step was an act of choice and willpower, not magic. And it was this humanity that made his power terrifyingly real. He protected her soldiers, he protected her city, he protected her very throne. And Elara's heart swelled with awe and gratitude, for she had never imagined that one being, one human, could alter the course of battle so completely. Night fell, and the battlefield glowed under twin moons, the enemy forces retreating but leaving pockets of resistance that threatened to sabotage their victory. Yet Rylan pressed on without hesitation, leading small squads to intercept stragglers, extinguishing ambushes, and ensuring that her city remained secure, his focus unwavering despite exhaustion, blood, and wounds. And Elara followed closely, her trust absolute, realizing that she had come to rely not on her magic, not on her palace, but on the steady courage of this human, whose spirit refused to break even when the odds were impossible. As the final skirmish faded into silence, the city stood intact, its walls scorched but unbroken. The enemy routed or captured, and the soldiers cheered for Rylan, lifting him onto their shoulders in a spontaneous celebration. The princess could barely contain her pride and relief, for she knew that without him, Thalindor would have fallen, its people enslaved or destroyed, and she approached him as the crowds dispersed, her golden armor gleaming in the moonlight, her voice trembling with emotion as she told him that he had saved not just her city, but her world. And Rylan met her gaze, weary yet steady, his humility shining as he reminded her that courage belonged to all who dared to act. That night, as the palace quieted and the fires of the battlefield dimmed to embers, Elara sat with Rylan in the royal gardens, the silver light reflecting off the fountains and flowering trees. She asked him about his journey, about his people, about the life that had forged such resilience and instinct. And he spoke openly, sharing his hardships, his losses, his triumphs, and she listened in awe, realizing that humans carried a strength not measured in magic, size, or lineage, but in sheer will, adaptability, and the unshakable refusal to surrender. And she knew in her heart that the human she had once thought gentle had revealed a power beyond comprehension, a force that would protect her world for years to come. The next morning, the enemy returned with reinforcements far larger than the first wave. Strange machines that hummed with energy and warriors armed with weapons that could pierce stone. Yet Rylan rose before dawn, moving through the city to inspect defenses, reviewing the walls, the gates, and the surrounding terrain, his mind calculating angles, timing, and human intuition that no machine or magic could predict. And when he emerged before Elara, she felt a thrill of awe, for she realized that the human had already begun to plan not just survival, but victory. Rylan spoke to the guards and soldiers with quiet authority, issuing commands in a language simple and precise, teaching them to move as one, to anticipate, to observe, to adapt. And the soldiers listened with rapt attention, some doubting at first, yet gradually understanding the brilliance of his methods, as he demonstrated that even mortal beings, without magic or advanced technology, could outthink and outmaneuver a far stronger enemy. And Elara observed him with rising admiration, knowing that this human was unlike anyone she had ever encountered. When the first wave of the enemy approached the city gates, Rylan led the counterattack, moving with precision, striking where the enemy least expected, using flanking maneuvers, traps, and the terrain to devastating effect, soldiers following him without hesitation, inspired by his courage and decisiveness. And the enemy faltered, their formations breaking under the weight of unpredictability. Elara could not take her eyes off him, her chest swelling with pride, for the human she had believed gentle was now the spear and shield of her world. The battle raged through the streets, machines roaring and warriors clashing, yet Rylan adapted continuously, anticipating attacks, reading the enemy's strategies like an open book, while guiding Elara's forces with a calm intensity, and every move he made seemed to transform chaos into order, despair into hope. And she realized that humans had a power far beyond what her world had ever imagined. The combination of ingenuity, resilience, and fearless determination could turn even the bleakest situation into victory. At one point, a towering machine breached the outer defenses, threatening the palace itself, yet Rylan darted between guards and debris, climbing its sides with strength and agility that seemed impossible, targeting its weak points with improvised weapons and tactics born of pure instinct, and when it collapsed into a smoking heap, he stood atop the wreckage, panting but unbowed, soldiers cheering around him. Elara feeling a surge of relief and admiration unlike anything she had ever experienced, for the human had faced what she believed indestructible and triumphed. The enemy commander tried to rally his forces, sending elite units to flank the city and strike at the palace gates, yet Rylan anticipated the maneuver, intercepting the attackers with strategic precision, using misdirection, traps, and rapid strikes to neutralize threats before they could fully act. And even when exhausted and wounded, he refused to pause, moving with a relentless rhythm that inspired the soldiers and disoriented the enemy. Elara watched him in awe, realizing that humans could wield courage and intellect together in ways that even her magical elite could not match. As the day wore on, the enemy attempted a massive assault on the palace. Their machines and warriors coordinated to overwhelm defenses, yet Rylan had prepared every possible contingency, moving squads, reinforcing weak points, and using the city's structures to advantage, and the humans' calm leadership turned a potential disaster into a showcase of tactical brilliance, soldiers acting with confidence they had never felt before. Elara standing beside him, her heart filled with both pride and wonder, knowing that her world's survival rested in his hands. The battle reached its climax at the palace gates, the enemy commander personally confronting Rylan in a bid to break morale, and the two faced each other with a mixture of awe and lethal intensity, the human analyzing the commander's movements, anticipating strikes, countering with precise timing and ingenuity, exploiting weaknesses that no one else could see, and when the commander fell, the remaining forces hesitated, their fear and disbelief magnified by the human's skill. Elara's chest heaving with relief, understanding fully that Rylan's courage had not just saved lives but preserved the entire kingdom. As night fell, the city stood intact, the enemy retreating, their morale shattered, and the soldiers carried Rylan through the streets in celebration, cheering for the mortal who had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. Yet he remained humble, brushing off praise, reminding everyone that vigilance and preparation were as important as courage. Elara following closely, her heart full of gratitude and awe, for the human she had underestimated had proven that determination, ingenuity, and unwavering courage could achieve feats beyond imagination. In the quiet hours after the battle, Elara walked with Rylan through the palace gardens, the fountains glimmering under the twin moons, the air still thick with the scent of smoke and triumph, and she asked him about his world, his journey, his trials, and he shared them openly, speaking of survival, loss, and human resilience. And she realized that the strength humans carried was not just physical but mental, emotional, and moral, that their courage and ingenuity had the power to protect worlds, to reshape destinies, and she knew that the human she had thought gentle had revealed a force that would guard her kingdom and inspire her people for generations. The morning after the battle, the palace awoke to a quiet unlike any in memory, streets emptying as citizens emerged to witness the aftermath. Yet Rylan moved through the city with steady purpose, inspecting defenses, checking on wounded soldiers, and offering guidance where needed, Elara following close behind, her eyes wide with admiration and concern, for she realized that the human's strength was not just in battle but in leadership, in foresight, in his ability to inspire courage in others, without fear or magic, and the city itself seemed to breathe easier with him present. The nobles gathered in the grand hall, whispering uneasily, some questioning the Queen's judgment in allowing a human such influence, yet Rylan addressed them calmly, proposing reforms to fortify the city against future attacks, suggesting strategic outposts, improved communications, and training that emphasized adaptability and observation rather than strict tradition. And though many were skeptical at first, the logic and clarity of his plans gradually earned their respect. Elara, watching as the human she had thought gentle, commanded attention and authority like a king among her people. Elara and Rylan walked through the palace gardens at dusk, the twin moons casting silver light over the fountains and flowering trees. She asked him how he had learned to remain calm under such pressure, and he explained that humans survive by learning to observe, to adapt, and to act without hesitation when necessary. That courage was not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it, and she realized that this simple yet profound understanding of life had saved her city and inspired her people. The human beside her had become more than protector. He had become a teacher of strength and resilience. As the weeks passed, Rylan trained the soldiers and citizens alike, demonstrating how ordinary humans could accomplish extraordinary feats through teamwork, observation, and ingenuity. Elara joining him in these exercises, her confidence growing as she learned to fight and plan in ways she had never imagined, and the people began to shift their perception of humans, understanding that bravery and skill were not exclusive to the magical or royal, that determination and intellect could shape outcomes as profoundly as strength or lineage. And Elara felt a deep gratitude for the presence of the human, who had transformed not just the battlefield but their hearts and minds. One evening, as the city celebrated a festival of survival, the enemy returned for a final assault, a last desperate attempt to claim Thalindor. Yet Rylan anticipated their approach, organizing defenses, instructing archers, and placing citizens strategically to maximize their protection and effectiveness. And when the enemy reached the walls, they found themselves met with a coordinated force that acted with precision and confidence, every movement a testament to the human's leadership and foresight. And Elara watched him in awe, her heart swelling with admiration, for he had taken what she once thought fragile and made it unbreakable. The battle raged through the outer fields, yet Rylan remained a constant presence, moving with calculated grace, striking only when necessary, guiding, protecting, inspiring, and even when an enormous siege machine advanced toward the palace gates, he devised a plan to dismantle it, rallying soldiers and citizens alike to act in unison. And when the machine finally fell, its destruction was met with cheers and relief. The human who had once seemed gentle had become a godlike figure in the eyes of the people, a symbol of courage, ingenuity, and unshakable resolve. And Elara felt her admiration and love for him deepen with every act of heroism. When the battle ended, the enemy defeated or in retreat, the city unscathed, and the people celebrating, Rylan walked among them, humble yet commanding, offering encouragement, guidance, and comfort, while Elara stood beside him, realizing that his strengths had not only protected her world, but had reshaped the perception of what humans could accomplish. The nobles, now recognizing the value of courage and intelligence beyond lineage or magic, and she understood that this human had become the cornerstone of a new era for Thalindor, one built on ingenuity, cooperation, and unyielding determination. In the quiet aftermath, Rylan and Elara returned to the palace gardens, the moonlight soft upon their faces. She spoke of her fears, her doubts, the weight of responsibility she had carried for years, and he listened with patience and understanding, reminding her that the greatest leaders were those who could act with courage, humility, and insight. And she realized that humans had a strength unlike any other, one born not of magic or privilege, but of perseverance, adaptability, and moral clarity. The human beside her had not only fought like a god, but taught her to lead with the same courage and wisdom. As dawn broke over Thalindor, the city alive with renewed hope and determination, Rylan and Elara stood upon the palace balcony, surveying the land he had helped protect, the people safe and inspired, the enemy gone, and she understood fully that the human she had once underestimated had changed everything, her world, her heart, and the future itself. And she vowed that together they would continue to defend and guide their world, for the human had proven that courage, ingenuity, and the will to act could elevate mortals to godlike feats, protecting life and shaping destiny in ways she had never imagined.